All right, everybody, let's get started with the super formal portion of the program here this evening. So thank you for being here to what we're billing as the world's least boring HIPAA seminar, which shouldn't be too high a hurdle to overcome, one would hope. But there are a couple of housekeeping items here. We got James in the back there. Wave, James. Thank you for being here. Everybody make sure you drink up and eat and have a good time. Welcome. We appreciate Cahaba Brewing hosting us. And there are two ways that you can help me make this the least boring HIPAA seminar ever. And the first one, as the location implies, the more you drink, the more sense I make, and the more fun that you will have. So they have a lot of great options back here, so I encourage that. And the other one is to manage your expectations like my wife has over our almost 27 years of marriage. Low expectations, very key. So I promise you that there are not going to be any jargon here. I have a little competition to see if you are keeping up. So if I use a term that you don't understand or I use an acronym that I don't explain, yell out bunny and raise your hand and you will get a brand new crisp $2 bill. Sorry, we blew all the budget on the venue. Is Paul here? Do you have $2? You have a $2 bill? All right, they're $20 from Paul. So if you catch him in it, you're a lot better off. Just $2 for me. But the reason that I wanted to do this is because I have a lot of personal respect for the medical profession and for doctors. I actually wanted to be a doctor when I was growing up and went into college at pre-med where I discovered that I liked beer more than studying. So I got rid of that, but I've always had a really high respect for the medical profession. And specifically, without them, I'd be a widower because our first child would have died in childbirth. Our second child would have died in childbirth and taken my wife, Kristen, with her. So I owe a lot to the medical profession. And as such, I kind of pretend to be one on TV sometimes. When I'm in character, I like to do what I call intertraining. I teach people how to be safer from cybercrime without being boring as hell, which is not hard to do. So I've fancied myself a title called a cyber technologist. And we had to have a logo for the International Society of Cyber Technologists. And I stick around with my medical bag, and then when I'm in character, I actually will wear a lab coat, and I have a stethoscope with the mouse attached on it. So get the point across, I really like the medical community, and that's why it pisses me off that they are literally the #1 target for cybercrime now. It was just announced that a full 35% of all cyber attacks, all ransomware breaches, 35% of them are on medical providers. And that's just ridiculous. That's outrageous. It's unacceptable. And people are out there trying to save lives, trying to make people healthy, trying to take care of not only your family, but everybody else's families too. And then the hackers, and by the way, I'm sick of the term hackers. It gets thrown around a lot. The industry calls them bad actors, which sounds like fancier. I think we should just call them what they are, assholes. So these assholes are targeting people that are doing some of the best work that we have. Why? This is a guy named Willie Sutton. Anybody know Willie Sutton? He's famous for his answer to the question, so why do you rob the banks? And the answer was, that's where the money is. And medical is where the money is now. On the dark web, right now, you can go and buy a working credit card for about 35 bucks. $25, $35, you have a credit card, it'll work until they shut it off. A medical record on the dark web goes for between $350 and $1,000. The credit card company's been dealing with fraud for longer, right? And they've gotten really good at recognizing fraudulent charges, bad spending habits, and how long does it take you to cancel a credit card? A phone call, right? How easy is it to cancel your social security number? Yeah, forget it. So they're playing a very long game here. Once they have the medical records, they can make a lot of hay over that over many years. So let's talk about what you're up against. It's a us versus them kind of thing. And really it comes down to why they're hitting the medical providers so much. Is yes, there's the money opportunity, but also it's the strength of team. Kristen and I went to Furman University. Probably nobody had ever heard of it until the NCAA tournament here this year. But we've played Auburn in football 4 times. And we've gotten the crap beaten out of us every single time. So why would that happen? Anybody? Why would Auburn beat Furman? Not because they're smarter, right? They're better. What does that mean? So they have a better facility, they're better trained, they practice more, they're bigger. It could be any of these things. And poor little old Furman got stomped. So let's talk about what the bad guys team looks like. One of the best cybersecurity researchers in the country, if not the world, is a guy named Gary Warner, who's associated with UAB right here in Birmingham. And he found this help wanted ad from a hacker gang where they are recruiting for black skills. They're looking for the best of the best. And they talk about their team looks like. I have a document that's 14 pages long, and it showed 24 departments in their organization that they are hiring for. A lot of these may look familiar to you. IT support, human resources, operations management, investor relations. They are actually going out and soliciting investors to make investments in the ransomware gangs to derive a return. This is a very sophisticated organization. So then the question comes, who's got the better team? Them or you? Are you Furman or are you Auburn? Another thing that we're up against is there's so many damn internet devices now, right? So anybody care to guess how many devices are going to be on the internet this year? They're estimating between 30 and 50 billion devices on the internet. And how many of those are yours? Not very many. How many of them belong to the assholes? I don't know, but that's a lot of things to stop. That's a lot of distraction. That's a lot of chaff coming at you, and it makes it hard to protect against these folks. And then lastly, there's the growth of the cloud. Everybody's got data in the cloud. Cloud is somebody else's computer, right? It just means it's not on your network. It could be anywhere else. So I saw on average now, a typical business, even a small business, has 89 separate applications that they run day to day. So think about who uses Dropbox. Email, obviously. Salesforce, QuickBooks. You start running through these things in your head, and every single one of those is what we call an attack surface in the industry, because QuickBooks has got its own username and password for you. Same thing for Dropbox, same thing for your email. And you're spreading your risk across a lot more applications now. So what on earth do we do? Well, this, easy. Okay, thank you for coming, and y'all have a nice day. No. These are the things that we actually do. You don't have to worry about any of that crap, because all that you really need to do is some basic fundamental things, and HIPAA will help you with this. One of my new favorite acronyms, I made up a term called, we call it the pot of gold, and that's where does your stuff live without which you're out of business. So if you're a medical provider, it's your medical records platform. If you get locked out of that, you can't do anything. That's a pot of gold. We have to have an acronym, right? So I call it a POG. So email is a POG that a lot of people don't think about, especially in healthcare. Because how many times have we emailed somebody something that had medical information in it? It happens. Same thing with voicemail. Like if you are talking to someone over the phone, talking to a nurse, and they're describing their symptoms, if you record those phone calls, now you're retaining medical protected information in your voicemail system. A lot of people have never thought about that, but all of these things need to be identified, both because you need to be able to protect them from the HIPAA standpoint, but also you need to be able to plan for what happens if this pot of gold gets swept away. How do we recover from that? And how fast can we recover from that? So it starts with identifying your POGs and then protecting them. User awareness is a biggie. Just open your eyes a lot of times. So we train users on how to recognize phishing emails, recognize links, how you avoid bad practices. Like, you wouldn't park here, right? You go find the next parking lot because you're probably going to get door dinged at best. So a lot of common sense is involved in that. But the reality remains that 91% of cyber attacks start with somebody clicking on a phishing link. 91%. And this really scary statistic is 19.8% of employees will click on a phishing link. So going back to this kind of funny architecture of all these layers, those are the things that we really do have to do, because somebody's going to click on something, and by God, we got to have something waiting to stop whatever that evil is when they click on it. So there's no one thing anymore. For instance, what do Roll Tide and War Eagle have in common? They are horrible passwords. Horrible passwords. We scan clients looking for their passwords, and you would not believe how many times we see Roll Tide or War Eagle or some derivative as somebody's master password for their pot of gold. It happens. ultimately, what we are doing now, and what's making it simpler for us instead of that whole wide architecture thing, is in protecting the identity. And if you think about it, at its core, your username and your password is your identity, right? You're confirming to us or to somebody that you are who you say you are, and that you are worthy of accessing whatever POG it is that you're logging into at that time. So it's super critical. One password on every one account. You can't share passwords with people. Don't share passwords with accounts. LinkedIn has been breached a bunch of times. Lots of people have their email password is the same thing as their LinkedIn password. It's not hard to figure this stuff out. So you can do a lot of things to make it harder for the bad guys. And probably roughly half of the security services that we do are just to guarantee the identity of our users. And then the rest of it is to what do we do with the other people. And I'm not going to get into all this too much, but once we confirm the identity, so we put multi-factor authentication on. So when you log in, we can get you to where a user can log into one thing. You log into your computer, you put in your multi-factor authentication, which is a must-have, gotta have it. Then we can lock down all of your data, lock out those 30 billion users so they don't even have a chance to get to your pot of gold, even if they have the correct username, password, the right credentials, because they're not coming from a known device that has our management client on it across a known network that we're managing. So by doing that, we make life easier for the users. You log in one time and you're secured all the way through for all of your data. Now, it's a lot of work for us to get it to this point, but things are getting a little bit easier conceptually to make life easier for y'all. And this is where HIPAA comes in. If only there were a framework that would tell you how to do the things that you need to do. And for medical, it's HIPAA. If you just follow the check marks and follow the bouncing balls that Paul's going to talk about here in a second, it gives you a portal that you easily identify everything that you have, all of the gaps that you have, prioritize where those gaps are, and assign time, budget, effort to getting those things fixed. A lot of people think HIPAA is about perfection, that you're going to hold up this pinnacle of perfection to be HIPAA compliant, and he'll explain to you that's not really the case. It's more about making progress. They know that you're not Blue Cross Blue Shield. They know that you're not going to have the same things that they do at that scale, but they want to see that you're aware of what you do have, you're aware of where your stuff lives, and that you're doing the things that a reasonable person in your situation would and are proving it. So with that, thank you very much, and now we'll pass it over to Paul, who's the real compliancy expert, but appreciate your time here. We got that. Thank you. Let's get you turned on.
I think I did. Thanks, Ron. Hey, everybody. I am Paul. I am Vice President of Cybersecurity and Partner Engagement at Compliancy Group. I call that Vice President of really long titles. I didn't bring a business card today because it fills up the whole bottom of it. I used to do what Ron does for a living for a long time. I had an IT service provider out of Memphis, Tennessee. All I sold to by the time I sold my company was healthcare and Department of Defense manufacturer. Weird, right? You guys are exactly alike. You have an acronym or two or three that sit over your business every day, and if you screw this up, somebody from the government is going to come take a bunch of money from you. Those are the clients I've always worked with. The company I work for is Compliancy Group. If you haven't run into us before, we were founded by HIPAA auditors in 2005. What we used to do, if you go back all the way back to then, basically you had a guy named Bob Grant. He was a HIPAA auditor previously. He started a private company to go out and do really large scale like health insurance audits. So he would go into LA County, Tennessee Department of Health, Kaiser Permanente was a customer. We would go in, we would do an audit, we would tell them everything that was wrong in their business, and we would come back a year later and collect the same amount of money for telling them all their shit was still wrong. What we found when they started the company then is no matter how large your healthcare organization was, a risk assessment is not a work plan. And telling you what is wrong won't make you compliant. It's just going to make you afraid and put you in a corner. And a year later, when the federal government or some auditor comes in, you still have all the same problems. So what Bob did is we had a software, it was called the Guard. It was something that he had built to help track all the data for these audits. So when you do a HIPAA audit, there's the IT risk assessment portion, right? But there's your privacy audits, your administrative audits, high-tech subtitle D privacy audit, all these things that have have to be done. Then there's your policies, procedures. He had a tool for collecting this data and building out reporting. So he sold it to Kaiser Permanente and Tennessee Department of Health and LA County, and he came back a year later and it was all still wrong. Nobody did anything with it. They paid more and they did nothing. What he figured out is without somebody to help you, you're not gonna do this. Today, what we have, it's QuickBooks for HIPAA compliance, okay? But my version of QuickBooks comes with a bookkeeper. Because when you started your medicinal practice, if all I had done is handed you QuickBooks and been like, hey, check it out, take all your insurance payments and all your payments from your clients and all your financial data and pump it in here, and if the IRS audits you, you'll be fine. You're a doctor, you're a medical professional, I'm an IT guy. No, I would fail my audit because I don't know what to do. Today, what we have is a product with a little human layer like a bookkeeper that helps keep track of what you're supposed to do for a HIPAA audit, right? Why does this guy care? Why did I care? First of all, I'll tell you right now, if you haven't met us, this seal of compliance right here, you've probably seen that because it's endorsed by the American Dental Association, the American Psychiatric Association, about 40 major medical associations endorse it because you can do it. You guys as basic medical practitioners, not true compliance experts in most cases in your own realm, if you go down our process, even the smallest psychiatrists, which are mostly one-person mental health professionals, can actually get through our process. Where he and I come in is my story. I'm a small IT practice in Memphis, and he was talking about different groups he works with. You were the one group I wanted no part of at all. I'm plugging along, doing basic IT I had a concert hall service. Like we had signed a big Chick-fil-A contract. We had like half of West Tennessee. My partner kept wanting me to go into healthcare because he was like, these people really need IT services. But then what I do as a person is I read and retain data well. So I picked up the HIPAA law and I read it and I went back to my partner and was like, dude, there is no IT in this at all. This is a bunch of policies and procedures and administrative crap. This is basically a 700-page law written by lawyers to be audited and interpreted by other lawyers, and we can't deliver this. But I'm gonna be honest with you, at that point my IT company was like 3 people, we're going broke. I'm the kind of business owner that's not gonna take a paycheck so I can make payroll, right? And I got a real like softball pitch. I had a group called the Olive Branch Family Medical Center. Basically through one of my clients call me and go, hey, Tracy says you're awesome and I hate my IT provider. And they handed me the biggest quote I've ever seen at that time in my life. It's like $15,000 a month for 80 people working in the shop. And they're like, hey, if you'll match that, you've got it, right? So done. Sold, 100%, I'm all over this. I got you. But here's what happens. So fast forward about 45, almost 60 days, I've signed the contract. Client's happy, we've migrated all their stuff. I brought in firewalls and he said, we're not gonna do jargon. Oh, I did jargon. EDR, MDR, SOC, SIM, I'm like Charlie Brown's teacher. Womp, 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 nerd shit, right? Like I brought it all. Everything you can possibly bring into this environment, I do. And they love me. And then I get this phone call. I'll never forget this woman's name. Her name is Faith Wilson. I get a phone call from Faith Wilson. She says, Mr. Redding, my name is Faith, and we should have met. I'm the compliance officer for Olive Branch Family Medical Center, and really we weren't supposed to sign a vendor until I talked to them. You're not fired, right? Everybody loves you. I just need you to tell me what you're doing for your HIPAA compliance program today. My what? Your HIPAA compliance program. You're our vendor, right? So I start with the Charlie Brown thing, right? We put in Fortinet and we use Sentinel-1 and we want. I have no idea what you're talking about at all. Like none of those words mean anything to me. Your compliance program, what do you do? So I do what every nerd does. I went to Reddit because she was like, I need 60 days max and answer. So I go on Reddit, like help. And we are called MSPs. There's a whole subsection of Reddit, like I post, and people give me tools. They're like, here's a vulnerability scanner. Again, Charlie Brown nerd crap, or IT. I got this. Finally, I went on our HIPAA. I was referred to that seal in this group by the chair of the Iowa Optometric Association because of one of my posts. My post basically said, I'm a small IT provider, I need somebody to do HIPAA for me, and I don't have $25,000. So he sends me the CEO's cell phone number, back then we were small, and he says, hey, you call these people. I call them, and what I found was an organization that helped me put together a complete compliance program in less than 30 days. Matter of fact, and I think I met with our coach, I'll explain what that means. I think I met with somebody for about 3.5, maybe 4 hours over a period of a month. I did about 6-8 hours worth of homework, and I went back to Faith Wilson, and half the time she asked me, I was like, hey, here. And a big stack of reports. And if she had wanted them, I had 400 pages worth of policies and procedures, and all my employees, all 5 of them at the time, had all trained, everything had worked. Faith became the first time I ever, or any MSP, ever resold a deal like that. Faith asked me how I could possibly put that together in that time frame based on being an IT provider. I introduced her to Compliancy Group, and she became my first customer. Because as an IT provider, like SIP Oasis, my first job was to protect my clients. What Faith saw was that I joined the healthcare space, right? What she was asking me to do, I didn't understand this. When she's like, what's your HIPAA policies and procedures? What's your program? She means, you sell to me, that means you're in healthcare, right? You do this too. So I did. And that seal and what they gave me proved that I did it. The second thing though, which is maybe equally important, if my clicker will work, is that I had no intention on reading, learning, and maintaining a 700-page law. I'm telling you right now, not gonna do it, don't care. There's a whole thing called the high-tech subtitle D private. I don't give a shit, I don't care, I don't want to read it. I just want to be able to say that my client won't fire me, right? And then my company. There was nothing that differentiated us. I didn't realize that until I went through this process. When Faith looked at me and goes, wow, you onboarded everything I have to do in this space, I realized what I had done is I differentiated my business. I went forward, and that's the reason I ended up selling to nothing but healthcare and DoD manufacturer later, because I went forward and I realized I'm just like you. I have the exact same problem you do. And the last thing is, I showed my commitment to her. That's what Ron's doing by bringing you guys in today. Ron is a healthcare organization. He is just like you. He has the same pain points, because if he works with just one of you, back here, this lab that he works with, he has access to all that EPHI. And if your current vendor or your IT provider or your phone provider or your email provider or any IT provider out there has access to your stuff and they're not doing what you're doing, then they are falling down and they are putting you at risk. I built a whole business model around it. I became our first reseller. I sold my business. I became the vice president and the chair of the group that works with folks like this. That's how I got here today. Now, folks, why I am so passionate about healthcare, why he is the big risk that we're talking about, I don't know if you guys realize this. You guys represent almost 30% of the US economy. Prior to COVID, you were already 26% of the US economy. There's a 400% increase in enforcement against you, and 94%, that is out of this room right here, everybody but this lady right here is gonna fail their audit. The odds are literally that high. Over 9 out of 10, 94% of people that have ever been audited by the federal government have failed. Today it's getting even worse when you fail your audit, because the audits are relatively rare, but what's happening now is before you even go through the audit, you're a member of a class action lawsuit, because what you're holding are thousands of people's records, and if you lose them, it's a violation of my contract. We'll talk about that in a second. But here's the other side of this. So the reason, and he actually touched on this, he did a great job of this. I explained you guys as the liquor store and the other sectors of the economy as the bank. So check it out. About 20 years ago, banks, financial, manufacturing, all these groups started to be hit by attackers, right? And the federal government really stamped on the financial sector and these other big sectors of the economy. And they enforced it heavily, and they said, if you get screwed, we're gonna hit you hard. So right now, if I try to hack a bank or a financial organization, they have a purple team to protect them, a red team that's testing against it every day, gray hat hackers that are simulating what we are doing. And folks, y'all have none of that. That is because in the healthcare sector, the small businesses represented here are the vast majority of your sector. So to put that in perspective, when you talk about 26% of the US economy, healthcare versus, let's do financial. Financial, most of the money comes from Morgan Stanley, right? That size organization, big, massive banks, a few of them, only a handful of really large organizations trickle money down into the rest of the economy. You guys are an inverted pyramid. There are 5 million small businesses that make up healthcare. 5 million. And those small businesses are privately held. They are not protected by red teams and blue teams. They didn't hire in full-time IT. Who here has a $250,000 minimum per year cyber engineer working for them? Anybody got $250,000? But the bank does. So if I'm a bad guy, I can rob 16 liquor stores before I get away with one bank. You guys are the liquor stores. Everyone else is the bank. And because you're so attacked, and because historically you haven't known what to do to protect yourself, and because the failure rate is so high, they're enforcing it increasingly against you, because I'm telling you right now, there are carrots and sticks. If you don't follow the carrot, they're gonna hit you with the stick till you fix this. You're not gonna continue to lose this war, okay? Now, before we continue, I don't want anybody to call me a liar, which has happened. There are not 5 million doctors. So for you guys in the room, if you are in medical care, which I think most of you are, you make up only 800,000 of those small businesses. For every one of you, there's 4 of us. You have a phone vendor, a print vendor, a billing, your accountant that does your QuickBooks. Every single one of your vendors is a healthcare organization, what's called a business associate, and they fall into this bucket. I can't tell you who, because that would be bad, but the call I spent an hour and a half on this morning today is somebody that their instant messaging vendor, somebody that they use, that they have a business associate agreement with, has had a breach and they have dumped out all of their patient records, roughly 75,000 of them. The problem is that even though my client did nothing wrong, they have already been served an investigative request by the Office of Civil. And if they do not have their house in order, they are going to be audited because their vendor fell down. So folks, back to this is the scary part. I try not to scare the hell out of everybody. I'm gonna spend the next 4 minutes doing that and then we're all gonna get happy again, okay? But your vendors create a hole that you can't control. That's the reason that 94% was so high. And that's the reason that we work with groups like this. If he doesn't have my seal of compliance, I'm not here today. I don't work with every IT vendor in Birmingham. We don't work with Bob's computer shop over here that fixes broken cell phones. We work with groups that absorb their own risk and take care of their own house first, because I can't work with you through them if they're your problem, okay? Now, I'm not gonna read all these stats. What I am gonna tell you is that the world has changed. The one that scares me the most when I talk to groups like yours is this one right here. 62% of hospital administrators say they are not prepared to handle ransomware and the risks they face. Who here's a hospital administrator? Okay, over half of them are scared to death about what's happening, and they have the teams in place. The reason the small business sector has been failing so much is because not understanding the risk, you wait for it to run you over. And then the last thing I will throw out, it's not just ransomware anymore. Back in the day, the big risk was, look, they're gonna take your data, you won't get it back, all your patients are gonna sue you. During the pandemic on the West Coast, a hospital was shut down with ransomware. They hit their emergency response software. They did not ask for anything at all. It was a ransomware with no ransom request. They did this because patients died on the way to other ERs. There are countries that hate us. We have bad guys, and you guys right here, your industry and your infrastructure is a great way for me as a bad guy to disrupt the American culture and the American way of life. You are in a place where we're moving from ransomware to what we call deathware, right? Which is crazy, but the goal is to truly disrupt us. And again, the financial system is dealing with this. You guys aren't yet, because nobody's talking to you about this. So, anybody ever seen this before? I'll get out of the way. Do y'all know what this is? All right, check it out. Look up the HIPAA wall of shame. But before you do that, please, for the love of God, put HIPAA before that. Do not just look up the wall of shame. If you do, I'm not responsible for what you return. I have no responsibility in this at all. This is a list of good people that bad things happen to. If you ever have a breach, if you ever have a fine, if you are ever called into task by Office of Civil Rights or Health and Human Services, your business, your name as an owner or administrator, the type of incident, what you did wrong, all of that goes on this website and it'll never come down. It's a list of every good person that a bad thing has ever happened to since the HIPAA law was passed. And the average fine on this is $1.5 million. If you take a look, 95% of the things that caused the fines were HIPAA breaches caused by hacking incidents, lack of cybersecurity. But what's illustrative and what's really interesting is what the fines were issued for. So the audit happened because you got hacked, but you got fined because right here, I don't know if you know this, if you work with Ron and you don't have a business associate agreement with him, before the audit starts, you get a $31,000 fine because you didn't have a contract in place, okay? If you have an ineffective compliance program, this was actually Cottage Health and this huge hack. It was caused by an IT provider dropping the ball, but their compliance program was ineffective because they hadn't reviewed it in 2 years, okay? Each one of these, if you actually take a look at it, unencrypted devices was because they didn't have a bring your own device policy. They were allowing their employees to use their personal phones with no policy mandating encryption, right? The incidents that caused this are IT. The fines are because of you, because of your lack of your policies, procedures, administrative controls. You as an organization are responsible for what happens when technology fails, or as Ron pointed out, human beings do dumb shit. Now, everybody know about patient right to access? If you don't, I'm gonna clue you in right now. You have 30 days to give me my medical records. You don't have 60 because your building burned down. You can't charge me 15 bucks a record because you want to. You have 30 days, and this is going down to 15 at the end of the year. This is why groups like Ron's put in a full backup and disaster recovery program. Here, let me ask a question. Who here is on Microsoft 365 for their email? Google? All right, who is paying for backups on those programs? Okay, so all of you assume that Google and Microsoft are backing up your stuff, right? Read your user license agreement. I don't know the clause in Google and Microsoft, it's section 6B. It actually tells you that they're not backing up shit. Microsoft has absolutely zero responsibility for your data whatsoever. If you are not backing it up and you have a problem, then you fail the audit and Microsoft told you. As a matter of fact, in section 6B, Microsoft recommends a third-party backup. But people don't know that. This is what goes back to this 94% failure rate. People don't understand that the risks are organizational for the fines, not IT. For example, guys, San Diego Health. These guys right here have not been fined by Health and Human Services. I show this because talking to a bunch of doctors, at the end of this, and I say, any questions? Somebody goes, what are the odds and how long does it take to get fined by HHS? Watch this one. These guys right here have had a breach for 496,000 patients. They have gone through a class action lawsuit which moved 5 times the speed of HHS. The reason, everybody knows the privacy paperwork I fill out when I come to your doctor's office, right? And I get the little thing I fill out. You understand that's a contract with me, right? You're saying you're HIPAA compliant. You are saying that when I sign this off, when I say who you will give this to, you are telling me you won't give it to anybody else. But in this case, they were breached and they weren't HIPAA compliant. And because they weren't HIPAA compliant, they're being sued for breach of contract by 496,000 people. You know the mesothelioma ads? Have you been victim of a breach? These guys, right? HHS hadn't weighed in. This is according to the lawsuit. They owe $250 to each one of those people, minimum. Up to $4,000 if you can prove damages. But if you are one of those 496,000 people, you're about to get a little card in the mail that says if you fill this out, you get 250 bucks. Somebody do the math on 496,000 times 250. The fine they're gonna get from the federal government is gonna be like $3 million. They're not gonna give a shit about that fine when they get finished paying the 250. And by the way, this is gonna happen to much smaller organizations. You only have to have a handful of people to put together class action right now. If I can prove that you violated the rights of a bunch of my clients as an attorney, they don't have to pay me, I'm gonna come after you. Breach of implied contract. Again, HHS ain't involved. Okay, we're not doing so great. Maybe y'all have an issue. I'm just throwing this out there. Could be possible that you're not doing what you should. Wait, oh, sorry, that was bad. No, guys, look, you're not trying to screw this up. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm a very cynical person. If you hang out with me for a little while, you'll find that out. I have a very dry sense of humor. And even as cynical as I am, I don't think all 94% of all of the organizations that have ever been breached and have ever been audited intentionally were gonna try to fail this. The problem is your industry and most human beings do not understand the difference in these two words, okay? So there's compliance and security. Compliance is adherence to a law or regulatory act. That means lawyers, tons of words, very gray security controls, and also compliance means that it's applicable to an entire industry. So let's leave healthcare for a second. I'll make this make sense, okay? Boeing and Nike are both publicly traded, right? So they both have to be SOX compliant. They have this huge list of laws that they have to comply with, and cybersecurity is a portion of that law. But Boeing makes missiles and Nike makes tennis shoes. The federal government is going to let Nike run out of money for security before Boeing. So they made their cybersecurity controls very gray and amalgamous. Basically, like, you figure out what's good for you. Compliance says have effective security. That's the industry I'm in, helping you figure that out. He does cybersecurity. Security is risk management. How likely is it something bad is going to happen to you? How bad would it be if it happens to you? And how much should you specifically spend in order to alleviate that? Depends. We just figured it out, right? Boeing has a much higher risk than Nike, so Nike gets to spend less to achieve the same controls. But when you guys talk to your IT person, if it's not in a group like theirs, or you say, what should I do to comply with this HIPAA law? You don't understand that collectively. You didn't know that. What you know is you want to be safe, okay? You would like somebody to come in and tell you that the business you're building is still gonna be there tomorrow. I had a doctor tell me one time he viewed HIPAA as something that's been done to him for trying to help people. What he's really saying is, if I just go in every day and try to turn medicine and money, goodwill into helping people, then they should leave me the hell alone. But the problem is, if you can't comply with the law, then you're not secure. If you're not secure, you're gonna lose my data, and I'm the patient that walked in here and all I asked you to do is help me. That's the problem. I had somebody at one of these events, at one of our events where I'm selling to IT guys, he goes, okay, great, because it's which side of the table is better? He said, so what's more important, compliance or security? Folks, that's like asking me what's more important, my house or the foundation. The foundation of compliance is security, but it ain't doors and windows and walls. You as a business owner are responsible for putting up the doors and windows and walls after he builds the foundation. Okay? That's what they expect you to do. Now, we got a 700-page law, roughly 4 more minutes, and I'm going to teach you all of it. Everybody get out your notepads. This is no? Okay, great. The reality is, it would be more fun to set my face on fire and put it out with a fork than to explain the HIPAA law in reality. And by the way, a hell of a lot more fun to watch. Okay? What I will tell you is all compliance works this way. If you have PCI to deal with, it's all the same. Okay, guys? Make HIPAA make sense in 2 minutes. Watch. You have 3 rules: privacy, security, omnibus. You guys are doctors, you know the privacy rule, right? I talked about the paperwork I fill out. For every rule though, there's an audit. The audit is for your policies and your procedures and your training. So if you have privacy policies, do you have procedures that your employees are trained on, and you have attestation and proof that they've done it? Security, his job, right? IT. Now, hang on, everybody, chill out. IT is literally 1/3 of the security rule, okay? You have the IT risk assessment, you have the device audit. That's all your IT stuff, the computers, the systems, the cloud, all that. But guys, he is not going through your trash to make sure you're not throwing away EPHI improperly. He's not looking at the clipboards that are on your walls to make sure that they're not facing patients. He's not even looking at the fact that when you go into your practice, if you're a regular medical practice, when I leave the area of the patient area, can I see reception's screen right there in front of me with somebody else's medical record? That's the physical side. And then the administrative privacy audit, this is how you are handling the physical side of security in your business. And then the last one, omnibus rule. Anybody heard of the omnibus rule? Do you know what it is? A couple of nods. For those of you that are not familiar, I'm going to make it make sense right now. I call it the on the bus rule. It's how we got here. If I have a single healthcare client that's on the HIPAA bus, I got to get my ass on the bus with them. I'm in healthcare too. This is your business associate agreements. It's also your breach notifications. What you have to do when you have a problem. All that came in on the omnibus rule, and there's a crazy little audit called the high-tech subtitle D privacy audit that must be done on that rule. For each of these, you have at least one audit, one policy, and one procedure, and if you don't look at it every year, and I'm your auditor, and you can't prove you did, then you fail. So all the IT stuff he did only really takes care of 1/3 of this, and you are responsible for doing the rest. He sells this. We do this in cybersecurity. Don't worry about the Charlie Brown stuff. What he's actually doing, so in case you ever have to ask your IT guy, like, why do you have to monitor my stuff? Why can't I share passwords? Everybody works on the reception account. Why I gotta pay for antivirus, right? This is the IT stuff that every healthcare organization must have. But just paying for that does not get you out of your obligations under this rule. People call this the soft side, okay? Anybody heard the soft side of compliance, right? Policies, procedures, audits, and training. When I say HIPAA training, if you're paying for HIPAA training, which means once a month your people watch a video, that is not what the law meant. They meant, do you have documented proof that Janet in accounting watched a video that told her policy and procedure actions, what she is supposed to do with her job, and how she can proceed, and what happens to her if she doesn't? We have a lab or two in the room, so I'm going to tell a quick story, make this make sense. So in Oregon, we have a lab, they're like a blood work lab. You basically go in, you do urinalysis, blood tests, all this. Usually it's because your doctor doesn't know what's wrong with you, and they send you there to do a workup. Conversely though, sometimes people do this themselves. You sign up to go in and get tested because you're not sure what's going on with you and you don't want to talk to a doctor. I'm not implying anything, I'm just saying there are socially awkward situations that make people get tested by themselves. Why this matters is because there's a guy that goes into a blood lab and has no idea his mother-in-law works there. So he goes in and he gets processed and he did an STI workup, full STI workup. And his mother-in-law came across his record on her desk. So she called her daughter and told her daughter what he was getting worked up for, and I have no idea what happened when he got home, but it resulted in a complaint to Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice in Oregon. He tried to hit this blood clinic with everything. No fines, no corrective action, it was our client. Because let's call the woman Janet. On January 15th at 9 a.m., Janet had logged into my software and she had read a privacy policy that told her she could not do that, no matter who that person was. And she attested she understood it, she attested she would follow it, and her company told her in writing they would fire her if she did not. So the company fired her, and he ends up suing Janet, I assume, but no fines, no corrective action, because the soft side was in place. To make this make sense, I'm going to leave HIPAA again for a second. Folks, technology cannot fix stupid. The reason the government is so worried about what you are doing inside your organization is the overwhelming amount of times that you're going to get breached is because one of your employees did something dumb. Or you, or me, right? Human beings get in a hurry and we don't pay attention. Human beings that are poorly trained, that are not told what their job is, will not follow instructions and won't do it. For example, this guy right here. Anybody heard of this guy? I'm gonna back up one. Anybody ever seen this guy? Come on, give me one. No? Oh, I love this. I make a living out of calling this guy a dumbass. This guy, I feel bad for him because I really do. I beat the hell out of this guy. I'm not the only one. This guy right here, if you live in Hawaii, you know exactly who he is. Because one day, picture us all sitting here having dinner, every phone in the room went off. Amber Alert style noise. You look at it and it says from the Hawaii Emergency Management Association, North Korea has launched a nuclear attack against Honolulu. Basically, we should all text our moms we love them, get under the tables, hug each other, and kiss our ass goodbye. But the reality is, there was no nuclear attack. There was no hack either. No advanced crazy hack and breach thing happened. No, this guy right here was the director of the Hawaii Emergency Management Association. He was super proud of his new job. So this is his Facebook profile. And that right there is his password on the screen behind him with his username. Worse, if you look real close, that's a whole different system. A 16-year-old in his mom's basement can hack you if your username and password are on the internet. So what saves them? His technology, security, all the EDR? No, you can't fix stupid with tech. HIPAA though, right? Hawaii Emergency Management Association, all the government regulations. Little puny HIPAA saves this guy's ass because I do the audit under HIPAA. I do the soft side audit. The first side of that soft side audit is I do the risk assessment. That means instead of just the IT portion, I walk by the guy's computer, I'm like, dude, what is this? Do you realize that we have policies for credentials managements and procedures that you're not following? Hey, Bob, let's go retrain. That's what the government expects from you. Not perfection, not the ability to prevent your customers or your employees or even yourself from making mistakes. They expect you to have the soft side, the policies, procedures, administrative functions, the audits in place, and they won't fine you. Because if they had this and he had been trained, that wouldn't have happened. And we wouldn't all be sitting under a table, kissing our ass goodbye, thinking we're freaking out, and in reality, some 16-year-olds in his mom's basement laughing at us. Folks, that is what we do. If you ask what my product is, why he brought us in here to talk today, back to my conversation with Faith Wilson, all I did, I got a software license that cost me a couple of $100 a month. I met with somebody anytime I needed to that would walk me through the process, but I only spent like 3 hours meeting with them. I spent less than 6 hours of my time in the first year and less than 3 hours of my time in every year thereafter to maintain my own HIPAA compliance program. I had an IT team on my side and a team on your side with these guys that would do a risk assessment around the IT, and the rest of the year, all my employees were trained, understood what to do, and guys, when bad stuff happens, had an incident response plan, had a program, had an anonymous way to report incidents and handle this stuff. That's why my company, when I sold it, was viewed as a gem, because we were HIPAA compliant and working with folks like you made you want to talk to us. Guys, when your patients look up a new doctor, the first place they go is Google. 78% of patients are going to start looking for a medical facility on the internet first. You have two choices, right? Illustrate your, really three. Ignore your compliance. Hope they just figure it out through employee reviews and patient reviews. End up on the wall of shame because you put your head in the sand for a few years and eventually you have something bad happen. Or I'll present a third option. Talk to Ron, talk to us, spend a little time, a little effort, elevate your business, get the seal of compliance I showed you earlier, and shout to the patients out there and shout to the world. I know what I'm doing. I take your privacy seriously, and I'm the medical provider that is truly HIPAA compliant. Folks, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I really do appreciate it. I hope we haven't bored you, and I hope the food was great. Please call Ron and talk to him, but if you need to talk to me, I answer nerd questions all day, so play Stump the Nerd. I challenge any of you to send me an email at Paul@Compliancy Group and ask me some weird compliance question I can't answer. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you.
Never, no day, never, no more shall I fall prey to hackers. No, never, no more. I called SIP Oasis, confessed my mistake, and asked them for help if it wasn't too late. They sprang to my office like a well-oiled machine and got me back working as well as my team. And it's no name.